Chapter 1. There was nothing she could do. Sturnon held her head in her hands, silent tears running down her eyes. All that she had fought so hard to build had been torn down in a matter of hours. From being High General Commissioner of the Nala Central Constabulary to an outlaw, a criminal, she was no better now than those who she had fought to arrest and put away. Katelyn Sturnon sat on the dingy bed near the cockpit of the ship they had escaped on, the Voyage Maker. The bedroom was not really a room, rather a small closet that the pilots would share on long inter-realm trips. As she looked up, images of the past few days flashed before her. Colonel Heckford's betrayal, the escape from the station, and then... Sturnon could not bring herself to think about it. What had she done wrong? Could she have done better? All those questions rang around in her head. The anger simmered within her. The loss, the failure, all things that she could have, no, should have, done better. Sturnon stood up and pounded the wall in fury. Again. Her cape she threw off, her epaulets torn from the shoulder, the badge ripped from her uniform. Sturnon felt she was unworthy. Ending her fit of rage at her failure, Sturnon sat back down on the bed, her uniform in tatters on the ground, tears streaming down her face. She did not usually cry. She never did before when she failed. She thought that it was the magnitude of the failure to stop what her predecessors would have been able to. Certainly Paulstrom, even Rosenberg would have stopped the Protectorate's rise. Bagstaff would have certainly ended it. He probably would have had them all committed for treason, even if there was no evidence. There was a knock on the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Ma'am, are you all right in there?" The voice was that of Maria Lemasters. She was a close ally and a bright spark in these dark times. "Ma'am, please say something." Nothing. Sturnon could not muster the strength to respond. "Okay, ma'am, I'm going to open the door." The door opened and Maria witnessed the demoralised wreck that was High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon. Sturnon looked up with bloodshot eyes, her mental resolve dissolved, and Maria knew something had happened to break her. But there was surely nothing that could break the resolute High General Commissioner. Chapter 2. "Are we all ready to vote?" echoed the commanding voice of Colonel Ravensthorpe at the head of the table. The remaining members of the Council of Colonels all nodded in unison. They were about to vote on the most important role in the constabulary, the High General Commissioner. Considered the pinnacle of any officer's career, to lead the entire constabulary is both a huge honour and a burden, and Colonel Sturnon of the civilian constabulary knew this. She had surprisingly been named as one of the last two in voting, along with Colonel Ravensthorpe of the Navy. Sturnon had no idea how she had been voted in. She would have thought Colonel Helga Dramden would have been ahead of her, having served longer on the council. Now, having said that, they were thin on the ground, with the department colonels for the Air Force, military and Special Forces all being killed during the war, along with the High General Commissioner, Damien Paulstrom, who was replaced by Joshua Chapman, who, along with Luca Paulstrom, were killed just a matter of days ago in a terrorist attack. This left the Council of the Colonels with Helga Dramden as second diplomat colonel, Colonel Ravensthorpe as Colonel of the Navy, Colonel Howard Arensk as Colonel of Special Groups and Jails Commissioner, and Sebastian Heckford as Colonel of Internal Affairs, and her, Katelyn Sturnon, as Colonel of the Civilian Constabulary, thin on the ground. Each member sat at the glass oval table in the sombrely lit room. Each wrote down their vote on a piece of paper, handing it to Principal Instructor Daniel Jameson, who was in charge of the Nala Central Constabulary Academy. Jameson then walked out of the room to count the votes. The colonels and their aides looked at each other nervously, making some kind of small talk about anything other than the vote. Colonel Sturnon sat, trying not to show her anxiety. She was convinced Colonel Ravensthorpe would be promoted. She had the credentials, she looked the part of a battle-scarred leader. Surely... The principal instructor re-entered the room, calmly closing the door, his faux leather boots resounding off the floor. An air of silence fell on the group as the aides withdrew and Jameson took his seat next to Colonel Ravensthorpe. "Thank you, sirs and ma'ams. I now ask the permission of the council to reveal the result of the vote." The assembled colonels looked at each other, agreeing to the vote being revealed. "You may proceed, Principal," spoke Colonel Ravensthorpe. Thank you, ma'am. As Principal Instructor of the Nala Central Constabulary, Keeper of the Vote for the Council of the Colonels, on behalf of said Council assembled here today, I can reveal that this Council's vote has determined that the office of High General Commissioner is awarded to... Jameson's pause was incredible. Colonel Katelyn Sturnon of the Civilian Constabulary. May you serve with distinction and honour. A rapturous applause exploded in the room as Colonel Sturnon stood to accept the position from the Council. Clearing her throat, the applause died down. She looked towards Major Robert Ember, her loyal aide, and smiled, with him smiling back. My colleagues, I thank you for your confidence in me. There are few honours higher than to take this glorious office. I shall endeavour to rebuild the constabulary from the ashes of the Realm War, and from there we will together build a better world. I will now ratify my position with the Mayor's office and begin the task of appointing members to the Council. Thank you once again. An applause broke out again, this time not only from the colonels but from the gallery above them, as the news spread throughout the constabulary of her appointment, as it brought much hope for a better future. 2 hours later, Colonel Sturnon arrived at the Mayor's office, now being held by the Deputy Mayor, Paul Roble. She approached the Secretary's desk. Colonel Sturnon here to see the Deputy Mayor, announced Sturnon, slightly nervous as to the responsibility she was about to take. Go ahead, he's been expecting you. Stepping inside the large circular office outlooking the main street, Sturnon greeted the Deputy Mayor, taking a seat at his desk alongside Chief Judge Thorndyke, the wise older judge. The Deputy Mayor straightened his tie and stroked his stubble beard, smiling broadly at them both. Rising from his seat, he looked towards Colonel Sturnon. Are you ready to take the oath? Katelyn nodded confidently, and both her and the judge rose, with the judge pulling out the law book of Nala Central. Judge Thorndyke held it out in the palm of his hand, gesturing Colonel Sturnon to place her hand on it, which she duly did. The Deputy Mayor then pulled out a worn document from his drawer and read from it. Do you, Katelyn Sturnon, swear to uphold the laws of Nala Central? Asked Paul Roble. I swear, replied Katelyn. And do you swear to follow those laws yourself and be beyond reproach in all matters, acting honourably and justly? I swear. And do you swear to honour the Nala Centralian way and protect this realm from both internal and external threats until the end of your days in office and beyond? I swear. Then, by the office of the Mayor of Nala Central and the Board of the Nala Central Judiciary, I hereby swear you, Katelyn Sturnon, in as High General Commissioner of the Nala Central Constabulary. May you serve with honour and integrity, the Deputy Mayor announced. Sturnon shook his hand, then Judge Thorndyke's. I look forward to working with you closely, High General Commissioner, said Judge Thorndyke. As do I and the Mayor, agreed Deputy Mayor Paul Roble. Thank you both. I will do my best, said High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon. Chapter 3. The Voyage Maker had arrived at its destination, the small realm of Devonshire. No one cared or really knew about this realm, being just a small rural farmland realm with lots of small islands. On one of those islands was the Valentine Fortress, a castle built in an old style while maintaining modern features, such as plasma defence cannons and a cavernous hangar for the Voyage Maker and other ships that were used by Valentine's crew on various missions. The castle's imported stone was dark grey and was reminiscent of the metal hideout of Trastenfell that was once there, that had since been destroyed by the Valentine crew. No one would find them here. Trastenfell had made sure to remove it from most major realm maps. Once the ship docked, everyone got off the portside ramp, which was big enough to allow any other ship to land inside the vast interior of the Voyage Maker. Please, make yourselves at home. The first 6 doors on the right of the upstairs hall are ours, but any other bedrooms are yours, shouted Kieran Valentine, who kindly offered his castle to the survivors. As they all went in with their meagre belongings, the survivors, along with Valentine's crew, made themselves at home, with Katelyn Sturnon being the last to find herself a room. She eventually found one that was quite large, with a single bed with mid-green sheets up against the wall, opposing a large wooden dresser with a mirror on the wall. To the left of the entrance there was an ensuite with a shower, toilet and sink. Sturnon sat on the edge of the bed, holding only her cape, epaulets and badge. There was a knock at the door. Tap, tap, tap. It was Julia Boston. Commissioner, I thought that I would bring you some clothes and toiletries, she said quietly, as she observed the fragile mood Katelyn Sturnon was in. She placed the items on the dresser. Sturnon struggled to find the strength to look up and respond. She somehow did and quietly said her thanks. We are all going to have dinner at 6 if you would like to join us. There is going to be a selection, said Julia. Sturnon could not face them. She slumped over as she dropped her bare belongings, which Julia picked up and placed on the bed beside her. "I'm sorry for your loss. I have no idea what you must be going through," reassured Julia Boston, who then withdrew from the room, leaving Sturnon alone with her thoughts. Once leaving the room, Julia went to the room of Maria Lemasters, who found Kieran Valentine talking with her. "Just wanted to let you all know that Sturnon isn't looking too good," gravely spoke Julia. "Yes, I noticed on the ship," returned Maria, aware that her commander was in dire straits and needed to have kept an eye on. "Okay, make sure to let me know, Maria, if you need anything medicine-wise for her. I will admit she did not look healthy coming off the ship," agreed Kieran. In her room, Sturnon sat on the bed, her mind struggling to process the events of that day. She heard the others gathering for dinner and thought that she should join them. But then she stopped, for she saw a skeleton figure in front of her, wearing the same constabulary uniform as... No! The skeletal figure reached out with a cold claw and grabbed Sturnon's shoulder. She screamed for the first time in her life. Colonel Bruce and Snake Rattler came in, but there was nothing there, other than Katelyn Sturnon huddled on the other side of the bed on the floor, rocking back and forth as if on a rocking horse. They had no idea what was going on, or why the once fearless High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon had suddenly become a quivering wreck. Chapter 4. High General Commissioner Leila Rosenberg once described being High General Commissioner as the only job where you can be the most powerful person in the room and still unable to get a word in. That was what High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon was feeling, in a meeting that was utter chaos. She had just appointed her former deputy Robert Ember to the position of Colonel of the Civilian Constabulary, along with David Bruce to the position of the Colonel of the Air Force, Abigail Masters to the position of the Colonel of the Military, and Rhys Keller to the position of Colonel of Special Forces. Meanwhile, Colonel Dramden appointed Daniel Jameson, former principal instructor, as the second diplomat colonel. With everyone still getting used to their new roles, the crosstalk was exceptional. "You can't just ask for more funding. What about the military? We need funding to rebuild following a war that has cost us heavily both from a personnel and equipment perspective," shouted Abigail the Masters. "Seriously, what about special forces? Most of my teams are decimated," roared Rhys Keller. "Surely you all understand we are a police force, ergo we must invest in the civilian constabulary who maintain day-to-day order," reasoned Robert Ember. "None of you have been on this council long enough to have that kind of opinion," exclaimed Colonel Ravensthorpe. "Well, good for you," sneered Howard Arensk. Sturnon had had quite enough of this. She rose to meet their level and shouted in a clear, demanding voice, "Will you all shut up and sit down?" The room went quiet. Dead quiet. Everyone sat down quietly. That was one thing that came with the position of High General Commissioner. Authority. "Now that I have everyone quiet again, I would like to ask that those seated on this council, if you have a genuine problem with my budget for this year, please speak now. This is the best I can do with the funds we have." There was no response. Everyone deep down knew that their budget was nowhere near enough to fix the damage that the Realm War had caused. However, they could not vote this budget down, and as it was the best anyone could do. The council looked at one another and then turned back to face the High General Commissioner. "Excellent. May we all vote on the budget?" asked Sturnon. While she wished she could have given them all much more funding than she had, it was impossible. With all the rebuilds going on across the city and the realms, it simply was not possible. The council all raised their hands in unison. "Budget passed," announced Sturnon. "Is there any other business that needs to be discussed in this meeting?" The council had no more business and the meeting was adjourned. In her new office, Katelyn Sturnon sat with the door ajar, looking through paperwork. She had her work cut out. First there was the budget speech this afternoon, then tomorrow there was the Government House address and her inspection of the Blue Eagle Air Base, and somewhere in between those two she had to visit West Side High School, not to mention at some point within the next week meet with the fire chief to discuss arson strategy, and then there was so much to do. She heard a knock at the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Enter," said Sturnon, who looked up and saw Colonel Sebastian Heckford walking in, his navy blue cape sweeping behind him as he flicked across his light hazel hair. "Ma'am, just wanted to see how you were getting on," he said with a kind smile. "Thank you, it is a challenge to say the least," replied Katelyn, leaning back in her chair. "Well, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it," Heckford said, bending over a chair. I don't know how they all managed it, and even managed to implement enough policy to get that council to function, Sturnon said, shaking her head gently. I think that all of them struggled initially. I mean, when Paulstrom came in after Bagstaff's downfall, he was confident, and when he appointed me to be Colonel of Internal Affairs, he said that even though he could convince the entire Realm Council to sign off on a treaty or two, it was a struggle to get anything done in that hot seat, said Sebastian, shrugging gently. Even the great Damien Paulstrom struggled in this job, queried Sturnon, giving Heckford a confused look. Yeah, we both struggled in our jobs initially. That first week was hell. I had to interview every single officer in Internal Affairs due to Thomas Bagstaff's corruption with his brother, admitted Heckford. Anyway, so what can I do for you, Colonel? Inquired Katelyn, who full well knew Heckford would not have walked in without a reason. Ah, got me. Knew I couldn't get anything past you. They said you were good, joked the Colonel. Yes, I was wondering if my department could be involved in the appointment of chiefs of staff and other high-ranking officers during the rebuild. I know that's cheeky, but I think we should be on the safe side in these times. Certainly. We need to make sure these appointments are quick, so if your officers have any objections, they need to raise them immediately, agreed the High General Commissioner, knowing that it would be easier to agree than not to. She wanted to make sure she made a good first impression as being tough on corruption. Thank you, ma'am. My team will get to work straight away. By the way, that uniform does look rather good on you, he said, walking out of the room. High General Commissioner Sturnon went back to her work, figuring out how to tackle some worrying statistics. High General Commissioner, it is time for you to get ready for your budget speech, came the voice over the intercom. Chapter 5. Breaking news. Following the ascension of Talia Verse to the position of Head of State of Nala Central, she has officially declared Nala Central as the Nala Central Federation. This move follows her decision to withdraw Nala Central from the Realm Council, with many realms fearful as to what will happen next. The news was constantly moving nowadays. Big moves were being made. The televisions in the castle were always turned to the news. They were all looking for hope, but there would be never any forthcoming. In the large living room with a cavernous fireplace and wide television on the wall, Kieran Valentine was sitting on the luxury black sofas, along with Maria Lemasters, Abigail Lemasters, David Bruce and Snake Rattler. And she definitely was huddled on the floor screaming, queried Abigail, disbelieving what Bruce and Rattler were telling them. Well, she was just quivering and shaking like a nervous domesticated rabbit, just released into the wild with the snakes coming at it from everywhere, returned Snake Rattler, his gravelly voice quietly reverberating off the chamber walls. I completely understand it. She has just lost everything, her home, her career, even her friends and some of her most trusted allies, reassured David Bruce, having been part of the board of directing admirals that witnessed the betrayal of Fleet Admiral Douglas James Verst all those years ago. Then what do we need to do to help the Commissioner? Questioned Valentine, concerned about the need for therapists and doctors which, given their situation, would be difficult to come by. We have to give her time. Sturnon is tough. She can get through this. We just need to reassure her and give her some space, suggested Maria. While she did not know Sturnon all that well, she knew of her reputation, and who she was from her mother Abigail, along with her now absent mentor, Mannery. Okay, sounds good. I've worked with Sturnon in the past during my mercenary years. She's a tough brick. Always held herself responsible for things. We'll keep an eye on her, tell the others. But I don't want her getting any worse. If she does, I fear that we may have to kidnap either a therapist or a doctor, said Valentine, knowing of his leadership role within this group of rescues and ex-mercenaries. I do hope you are joking about the kidnap, checked Abigail. Valentine raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a half-smile on his face. Getting up off the sofa, he left the living room. As he left, he turned, saying, I may be a cold-blooded killer, but while you are all under mine and my team's roof, you are under my protection. If anyone or anything causes mental or physical suffering to anyone here, I will do whatever it takes to make it right. He left the room, going to check on the dinner that was being prepared. The others were left alone in silence as the news rambled on. In other news, there are reports of a number of realms splitting from the Realm Council, following the creation of the Nala Central Federation. Although as yet unconfirmed, its potential existence was challenged by Chief Legislator Hector Gowron, who many have looked towards following Nala Central's withdrawal from the Council. Chapter 6. The Spire Star Hotel. A soaring spiral tower in the heart of Nala Central, with 5-star rooms, 5-star facilities, 5-star breakfast, and a 5-star service. Many who visited its luxurious lobby with its red velvet carpet and expensive furnishings gazed in awe as they checked in, the staff prompt to attend to the patrons in their purple tuxedos, offering complimentary refreshments. One of those rich and famous who was checking in was Julia Ratterford, flanked either side by her 2 unnamed bodyguards. "Hello, I'm Julia Ratterford, here to check in," announced Julia Ratterford at the check-in desk. The attendant then checked the register on the computer. "Yes, welcome, Miss Ratterford. Here is your key. Enjoy your stay," said the attendant calmly, handing her her key. A delivery driver walked in with a small package, ignored by everyone. Julia then started to strut to the lift to take her to her floor, stopping briefly for champagne offered by a close staff member on a tray. "Oh, thank you, very generous of you," sweetly said Julia Ratterford, drinking the bubbly and enjoying every sip of that sweet nectar. Her guards looked around, not seeing anything out of place. The delivery driver then strayed from his path to the front desk, moving swiftly towards Julia Ratterford, pulling out a loaded gun set to kill, pointing it at Ratterford. The guards noticed it, reaching towards the driver, but then there were 3 dead bodies on the floor as the Nala Central Constabulary officers in the lobby stunned the driver. He fell to the ground next to those he had executed with cruel, calculated aim. High General Commissioner Sturnon was met by a thunderstorm of questions in the press conference. How could this happen? What does the realm of Boston Bay have to say about the murder of one of their own? Who is responsible for this? All of these questions rattled around the conference hall. Sturnon raised her hand, and the press, as if trained from birth, ceased in a wave of calmness. "I would like to make a statement on the murder of the businesswoman Julia Ratterford of the Ratterford Group," said Katelyn Sturnon, in a clear voice that cut through the chatter of the cameras. "We have apprehended the perpetrator of this heinous crime, and they will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. At this time, the constabulary will not be disclosing the name of the perpetrator." The fever of questions returned to the room. Sturnon gestured to one of the journalists in the front row. "High General Commissioner, Nala Central now. Will the perp be handed over to the Boston Bay Police Force to face justice in their realm?" asked the journalist. The High General Commissioner responded, "Thank you for your question. I can disclose that we are currently in dialogue with the Boston Bay Police around this matter, though first they will face Nala Centralian justice, and then we will see from there. Next question?" She gestured to a journalist in the second row back in the centre. "High General Commissioner, Nala Central Times. What are the views of the Protectorate on these matters?" There was an awkward silence in the room. "Excuse me, I don't know what you mean," returned Sturnon, overcome by an uneasy feeling. "Yes, the Protectorate. It is my understanding that they are a group within the constabulary who have significant power," said the journalist smugly. Katelyn Sturnon paused, unsure of what to say next. The whispers began to build as all eyes were on her. Steeling herself, Sturnon delivered her response. "I will need to look into that. I am unable to comment at this time." The High General Commissioner withdrew from the podium, exiting the conference room, whipping into a whirlwind of questions. Speaking to her secretary, she asked to have a meeting with Colonel Heckford of Internal Affairs and Colonel Dramden, Senior Constabulary Diplomat. Sturnon knew what was going to happen next was going to be interesting. Chapter 7. They saw the fuel. They needed the fuel. But if they set off a spark, boom! They and half the realm went up in flames. After a couple of months of hiding out at Valentine's Castle, conducting raids on recently established Nala Central Federation garrisons, the newly dubbed Freedom Team were in desperate need of polonium, a highly explosive fuel. Maria Masters and Kieran Valentine crouched on a sheltered hill outside of the Nala Central Constabulary fuel compound. While they were focused on the task at hand, their thoughts and prayers were with their friend Katelyn Sturnon, who had taken a turn for the worse, being almost like a living skeleton subsisting only on bite smoothies. She was almost spectral, roaming the castle, having fits of screaming, while mumbling incoherent nothings all throughout the day. But they had to focus now. "Check that fuel on the right by the gate," observed Valentine, looking through the macronoculars, seeing that near the electrified gate there was a transport with polonium canister that had just been signed in. They knew that they would have to get it before it was unloaded and pumped into the fuel storage tanks. The question was, how? "There is a gap in the electric fence on the near side just below us. If we slip in there, we could get then along the fence line, avoiding the cameras and the guards, and then go either side of the truck. And there we go, enough polonium to last us 6 months, planned Maria. "Sounds good, let's go," replied Valentine. The two sneaked down the rock face of the hill, landing near a small gap in the fence, that while slightly rusted, still served a shocking purpose to keep thieves like themselves out. Maria thought how ironic it was that her, a former member of the now Central Constabulary, who would track down Peronium thieves, was now, in fact, a Peronium thief. They slipped silently through the fence and then, shielded by the large off-white tanks of Peronium, made their way to the truck. But then someone came from behind them and said in a quietly cheerful voice, "Hey, so you guys planning to steal that truck of Peronium?" Valentine and Maria drew their weapons on the unknown individual. He quickly put his hands up, prompting a whispered discourse between the three intruders. "Who are you?" forcefully asked Valentine, ready to eliminate the potential threat, gun still firmly pointed at his chest. "Take it easy, man, I'm Tristan Gowron," said the stranger. He then took a closer look at who he had run into and realised who indeed. "Wait, you're Maria Lemasters and Kieran Valentine of the Freedom Team." "Hold on, you're Tristan Gowron? The Tristan Gowron? The son of the leader of the Order of the Realms and native Nalacentralian Hector Gowron?" questioned Maria, with her blaster pistol lowering. "Yeah, that's me. Guilty," admitted Tristan. "We don't need an extra man for this job, and keep it down," hissed Valentine, lowering his weapon, turning to keep an eye on the truck. "Well, I am in awe of you guys. I was sent to blow up this place, but to be fair, I've been looking to get out of the whole Order of the Realms for some time," jovially said Tristan, flicking his dark brown hair to the side and adjusting his mask. "So, are you defecting to the Nala Central Federation?" said Maria, worried they were going to get caught. "No, I want to join you guys!" exclaimed Tristan. "What? He is not joining us. Can we focus, please?" cut in Valentine sharply, knowing that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. "Ignore him. I'd love to have you join us," replied Maria, who felt some strange connection to this stranger. Was it because, like her, he was the descendant of a famous Nalacentralian family? Or was it because she liked the way his chainmail-style armour sat on his green underarmour? Maybe it was his hair or his smile under his mask. Maria did not know, but she knew there was something. "Thanks," smiled Tristan, who too felt some strange connection to the accepting Maria, who, despite no longer being part of the now Central Constabulary, still wore that armour with pride. He wasn't sure about Valentine. He had heard stories about him being an infamous mercenary who killed efficiently, a grim reaper with an EN-57 blaster rifle and a Durellium sword. The three saw their opportunity and made a run for the truck. Chapter 8. Colonel Heckford and Dramden sat cautiously against the High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon, who looked at them seriously. They looked back, interested in why they had been pulled away from their duties to speak to the High General Commissioner personally. Sturnon adjusted her tie and spoke calmly and collectedly. "I have asked you both in here to discuss a matter that has been brought to my attention at the recent press conference." The two colonels looked at each other. They had both seen the press conference and appeared confused by the revelations at the end of it. "As you know, a journalist for the Nala Central Times questioned me about a so-called Protectorate. Now, I am aware of the petty factionalism within the constabulary between departments and sectors. However, this does not usually go beyond the constabulary, as it is friendly competition," explained Katelyn. "So, if it is, as you say, part of petty factionalism, why bring it to our attention?" inquired Heckford, with a puzzled look on his face. "I agree with Sebastian, ma'am. Why pursue it?" added Dramden, likewise confused. "Valid questions, both of you. The journalist claims that they have significant power, but I've never heard of them. Furthermore, the Now Central Times is a credible reporting institution. Anything like this they are reporting on must warrant further investigation," said Sturnon, aware that this could be potentially nothing, but there again it could be potentially something else, something more malevolent in nature. "You're asking us to investigate this group? I've never even heard of them. I'm sure they don't exist," shrugged Heckford. While he respected the High General Commissioner greatly, he did not wish to spend his time on a wild goose chase. "Perhaps, or perhaps not. Either way, I want to ensure that there isn't anything that is going to destabilise the constabulary further," said Sturnon in a considered manner. "Okay, ma'am. My department and I will look into this. I'll let you know the findings," assured Colonel Sebastian Heckford. While he thought internal affairs had better things to do, such as recruit screening, he knew if he didn't support the High General Commissioner in her early days, later on, he could see his career soon over. "I will conduct my investigations personally, ma'am. I will make sure that it is not something external feeding something internal," said Helga Dramden calmly. She wanted Katelyn to succeed. She was a good leader, something the constabulary sorely needed. "Thank you both," thanked Sturnon. The two colonels stood up, straightening their uniforms and adjusting their capes. They went to leave the High General Commissioner's office, with Colonel Heckford walking out the office. Just as Colonel Dramden was about to walk out the door, she was stopped by Sturnon. "Helga, could you spare me a minute?" quietly asked Sturnon, walking around her large oak desk, standing next to Colonel Dramden. "Certainly, ma'am. What is the problem?" queried the colonel, worried that something was troubling her. "I know that this may not be protocol, but I need you to investigate Colonel Heckford." Quietly. "I know that he is probably a good man, but he seems to have a lot of supporters within command, despite being in the most unpopular job in the constabulary. Usually being the head of internal affairs is a job for those with few supporters but who are very effective," said Sturnon, with a slight tinge of concern in her voice as they looked through the office shutters into Colonel Heckford's office, adjacent to hers. He was going through some reports with one of his officers. "Of course, ma'am. I assure you I will be discreet," assured Helga Dramden. She never completely trusted Heckford either. There was just something off about him. He seemed just like he was a little too at ease, as if he was in greater control than his position would suggest. She never could prove it or find anything to support her gut instinct about him, but if she was going to find anything, she knew she would find it now. Colonel Dramden then thanked the High General Commissioner and left the office, leaving Katelyn by herself once again. She began going through some reports. Now she waited. Chapter 9. The truck was left unattended, which meant that the three could make their move. They hastily ran to the cab of the green truck, with Tristan and Maria getting in the front of the truck. Valentine then circled round to the back of the truck, sitting next to the crimson peronium canisters. "Okay, let's get moving," said Maria, as she signalled to Tristan, who then started the engine. It roared into life, alerting all the guards and staff within the compound. There were shouts to stop and the sound of pursuit vehicles being started up, as Tristan put the truck into gear and floored it, ramming through the compound's main gate. The chase was on. Through the dusty desert landscape they raced. Their pursuers in their stark white and blue police cars were fast. They were nowhere near as fast as they could go, or were shooting at them. Maria knew this, as if they were to knock the truck or hit one of the peronium canisters, there wouldn't be much of the realm left. Despite this, Valentine, on the rear of the trailer, was firing shots with precision aim that disabled the cars that were chasing them. The sound of their sirens falling into the distance was a droning relief. "Matilda, we need a pickup," shouted Valentine into his wrist communicator device, firing off another couple of shots, disabling the closest car. They sped on, reaching the Barren Creek Bridge, a rusty suspension bridge that had been around since time began. They heard a helicopter fly above them and land in front of their path across the bridge, trapping them. The truck grinded to a screeching halt, with armed officers exiting their cars and the helicopter. "Get out of the truck and step away from the peronium," barked the commander, with the guns pointed at them. The three had no choice, unless they wished for a fight to ensue, which could be a risk. Tristan and Maria got out of the truck cab slowly, with their hands above their head. Valentine got off the back of the truck, the officers shepherding them to the right side of the truck. "Well, well, well, who do we have here? Some peronium thieves, I see. But not just any thieves, only the son of the leader of the Order of the Realms and two notable Nalacentralian outlaws," smugly said the commander, who knew he would be promoted and transferred off this Dust Bowl realm. "You can't hold us. We will escape," exclaimed Maria, confident that they would find a way out of this. The commander leaned in, getting in her face. "You may have once been a hero of Nala Central, but that time has since passed. You are now an outlaw. Nothing but filth and failure." There was loud bang! The helicopter had just been blown up. It was Matilda, in the Voyage Maker. She had cleared the path across the bridge. Maria and Tristan got into the truck once again, while Valentine provided some cover fire on the back of the truck. The engine of the truck groaned into life once again, and they were off. This time the commander clearly had run out of patience and started shooting at them. Those shots were getting close to the canisters. The hulking Voyage Maker, a cargo ship with 4 large ion engines that were constantly faltering, landed in a spacious clearing, lowering the portside boarding ramp, revealing its cavernous interior that the Freedom team knew all too well. The truck boarded the ship, heaving and panting from the chase, but its pursuers had pulled back, which was probably because they heard the sound of the 3 Cyclone jet fighter engines inbound from the nearby newly constructed Ranch House airbase. That was not good. "Take off and get back to Devonshire. I will deal with them," spoke Valentine firmly, activating the Delta X, his sleek experimental ship that he had had for many years now. The Delta X's engine screeched into life, with it beginning to hover in the cargo hold, its landing gear retracted. Valentine got into the cockpit and launched out from the hold to intercept the incoming fighters. The Voyage Maker then closed its ramp and began to lift off, while being shot at from afar by the officers on the ground. "You lot can't go anywhere without getting shot, can ya?" exclaimed Matilda, who was forever picking them up after something went awry in their missions. Today was no different. Chapter 10. Colonel Dramden was looking around the train yard. She had been tipped off about Colonel Heckford's staff meeting here to discuss some kind of secret organisation. Whether that was the Protectorate or not, she was unsure as the dark of night began to draw in. Her 2 guards in their black armour and helmets held their guns in anticipation of something sinister, but there was nothing as of yet. The rumble of the trains through the yard and beyond was like an earthquake as Helga walked between the tracks and beside the ballast. Realising that her effort was futile and this was just another wild goose chase spun by someone with an over-active imagination, she decided to call it a night. As she left the train yard, her 2 guards silently looked at each other, with intent in their eyes. Unaware of this, Colonel Dramden phoned her wife as the guards adjusted their weapon settings discreetly. "Hello, Sasha, it's Helga. I'm coming home now." No, just following up a lead that turned out to be a dead duck. Honestly, some informants will say anything. Her words were stopped dead by 2 blaster shots from her guards, who shot her from behind in the torso. Helga Dramden fell to the floor, her body went limp, 2 burn marks smouldered from her grey navy blue overcoat. One of the guards activated a communication device. "The threat has been eliminated." "Understood. We will stage the scene." The 2 guards looked at each other, readjusted their settings to stun, the default setting of all constabulary blasters, and fired at each other's shoulders. They both dropped to the floor, limp and paralysed, though unlike the Colonel, it was temporary. The morgue was a cold, dead place for the cold, dead corpses that were brought in. The poor, unfortunate souls that had ended up here for either unknown reasons or had become some victim of some violent act. It was on one of the stainless steel tables that Colonel Helga Dramden lied. "How could this happen? I was talking to her and then 2 shots, the line went dead," spluttered Sasha Dramden. She was in shock, having just identified the body of her wife. Tears streamed down her freckled cheek as she looked through the window at the figure covered by the white sheet. "Is there anyone who would wish her harm outside of work?" gently questioned High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon, aware of the sensitive time she knew Sasha Dramden found herself in. No, she got threats, but those were all baseless threats from political enemies, nothing more," explained Sasha, weak from the experience. "Understood. Please give the investigating detectives these threatening notes as soon as possible. The officer will show you out," said Sturnon, gesturing to the door. The coroner then stepped in to speak to the High General Commissioner. Sasha left by the double doors that squeaked as she left. Once alone, the coroner turned to Katelyn Sturnon. "High General Commissioner, I must disclose that the blast wounds matched those of a JL-51 blaster rifle," gravely spoke the coroner, his grey eyes showing his age and the death and the destruction he had witnessed during his many years in office. "A JL-51? That is the standard issue weapon of the military and various armed guards of the constabulary?" asked Sturnon. She was not entirely startled by this, as she combed through her short brown hair. "Yes. Should I inform Colonel Heckford and Internal Affairs so they can take over the investigation?" queried the coroner, scratching his coarse stubble. The High General Commissioner took a moment to think. Was Heckford behind this? But how could he be? He was in his office making various phone calls. There again, she trusted Colonel Ember, a loyal number 2 for many years, and Department 4, who were given the investigation. "No, not at present. Please send all reports to Department 4. I will talk to Colonel Heckford in time myself," informed Sturnon. She knew that Colonel Dramden's primary case was to investigate Heckford. Surely she wasn't killed for that. Was she close to something other than evidence against Heckford? The coroner left the High General Commissioner alone and continued his tests. All of these questions rattled around Katelyn Sturnon's head. Pulling out her phone, she looked through her contacts, selecting those who she still trusted and sent a text. Hopefully they would all respond. Sturnon knew the Protectorate were beginning to make more moves against her, and if it all went wrong she wanted to make sure she had allies. Now all she could do was wait until tomorrow night at her house. It was all a waiting game. Chapter 11. "Matilda, I will hold off the cyclone jets. Head to heading 501.659, said Valentine over the communicator as he engaged the fighters. "Got it, Valentine. See you back at the base," agreed Matilda. Valentine then prepared his weapons array. He and the cyclone jets passed, firing cannons. Valentine then banked round as the enemy fighters formed up. He shot past the informed jets and swung around once again. His weapons were charged. He fired off his twin cannons on the starboardmost fighter of the 3 cyclone jets. It dropped down. Valentine then fired a small homing missile that disabled the portside ship that spiraled out of control, the pilot ejecting. The first jet that he had fired at returned behind him and started firing at him. Noticing this, Valentine pulled back behind the jet, firing using his twin cannons at their wings, causing the port wing to explode and sending it spiraling out of control. One cyclone left. Valentine knew that he had to finish it or it would go after the Voyage Maker. Cyclogen then swooped left and up, trying to get an angle on its target, flying through the titanic natural rock arches and down into the canyons, but no matter what, there was no way it could evade this decoy ship that was preventing it from completing its objective. The Voyage Maker began its heavy climb through the air to cruising altitude as it lumbered towards the rendezvous point, but the final cyclone jet was sweeping in its blue and white livery through the canyons below, rising to aim its missile at the Voyage Maker. But then there was an mighty explosion that rocked it and caused every bolt and metal plate to quiver. It was not the missile that hit them below, much to the desperate relief of Matilda. Rather, the final cyclone jet had had its missile blown up. While still attached by Valentine in the Delta X, they could now escape. "Thanks for the save, Valentine. Not sure the iron regulator is going to thank you," shouted Maria over the communicator, yelling profusely at Maria and Tristan how to fix the ship in the most basic terms possible. "You're welcome. Meet you back at the base," said Valentine. He then sped ahead of the Voyage Maker, powered up the Delta X's realm portal projectors, activated them and sleekly disappeared onto the realm road, travelling back to their base in the realm of Devonshire. The Voyage Maker followed suit, albeit with a slight sputter and moan from its engines. It was going to need a few replacement parts. Chapter 12. They were all sitting in her tiny living room. It was a struggle to fit everyone in. All those she had sent out messages to had come. They were, in Sturnon's opinion, the great and the good of Nala Central. There was herself, along with Colonel Robert Ember, her loyal number 2 and colonel of the civilian constabulary, Colonel Abigail Lemasters, the calm and level-headed colonel of the military following her team's disbandment, and Colonel David Bruce, the well-mannered colonel of the Air Force. Additionally, she had some of her old friends from Department 4, including Captain Augustus Montgomery, Sergeant Ashley Turner, Ricky and Spanner, the latter 3 being the very best of the mechanics and engineers, and Major Jonathan Stephen Smith, once the loyal second to the missing Captain Mannery. Further entries into this group of trusted comrades included the new heroes, Wisp, the firefighter, graffiti builder, cold explorer and racer, Squadron Leader Kyle Bruce, the son of David Bruce and ace pilot, Principal Instructor Andrew Ammo Wicks, the weapons master of the missing Captain Mannery and of Task Force 71, and the remaining members of Task Force 71, Captain Maria Lemasters, Lieutenant Curtis Michael Bolt, and Sergeant Charlotte Blast Fount. All in all, there was barely any room to breathe. There was a bubble of whispering and shuffling as Sturnon stood in the doorway to the living room. The room looked towards her, Ammo squeaking on the 3-seater yellow couch as he got comfortable. The whispers died down. Sturnon straightened her tie and badge, looking towards the room, focusing on Robert Ember, who stroked his black beard gently and gave her a reassuring nod. She then looked at everyone else and addressed the room. "Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I've asked you all here to shield against the potential threat of this Protectorate that is rising and is coming to prominence in the news. I assume you have all seen the articles and reports." The room all nodded. They were all concerned at the growing number of articles and reports speculating on this Protectorate, and were getting numerous questions from the press and other officers. Although a man of relatively few words, Ammo raised his hand and spoke in his deep voice that reverberated off everyone and everything within the small chamber. "I'm worried. I've got instructors suspicious of each other. There's something going on down in the halls of the constabulary. Pretty sure there are some secret club meetings in the basement. Not checked it out yet. They've been sneaky." Abigail Lemasters seconded that and raised her hand, sweeping her jet black hair across and then calmly explaining her view. "I agree with Ammo. David and Robert can second this. Our commanders are either trying to become very friendly, almost as if to shield their careers, or are becoming very distant, almost dismissive of our orders, to the point where it is impossible to implement policy successfully." Colonels Bruce and Ember signalled their agreement. "So what are we going to do? If this Protectorate are going to make their final move soon, I don't want me or my family to be around when it happens," said Major Smith. The room accepted this. Whatever this Protectorate was planning, they all feared that their positions and potentially lives could be in grave jeopardy. The room looked towards Sturnon, and she knew she had to come up with something. I think I have a lead. Following the death of Colonel Dramden, I have a feeling I know who is a senior member of this Protectorate. The room leaned in, with the furniture and flooring giving a collective squeak and moan, as Sturnon spoke. It is my belief that Colonel Sebastian Heckford is part of them. A collective gasp engulfed the room. To even consider the Colonel of Internal Affairs was part of such a conspiracy would be scandalous. To even act on these suspicions would be completely unprecedented. If that is the case, we will have to leave not only our careers, but our homes in this realm. But we could not go by conventional means. We would get caught, exclaimed Captain Augustus Montgomery. The rest of the assembled were curious as to how they would get away. By all of the talk and plans that were building, they knew that it would be inevitable that this Protectorate would soon become a public force, one that could rip apart the constabulary itself. "I think I know a team that could lead us to safety," piped up Maria Lemasters, though she knew that if they knew who she was thinking about contacting, they would think she was mad. "May I ask who it is, Maria, given we will be trusting our lives and that of our families in whoever's hands?" questioned David Bruce. While he knew his son and wife were both adequate fighters, he was concerned about those who were not able to fight. "You're going to have to trust me. If we meet at Nala Central Grand Park, there will be a transport ship to get us out of this realm," explained Maria. The ex-cold-blooded killer mercenary Kieran Valentine and his crew were not the most palatable of allies, but in this dire situation they found themselves in, the group were going to have to accept it. "Very well, if we are agreed, we will use the defunct frequency 83.92 to signal when it is time to go," said Sturnon, more confident than she had been in the face of this looming threat of the Protectorate, who were gaining allies and officers of the constabulary daily. Those collected in the living room accepted Sturnon and Maria's plans, leaving in an exodus, going home and to the office to prepare for their upcoming evacuation. Sturnon watched from her tiled front porch as they all drove away. The threat of the Protectorate now felt very real and very immediate. She had to now get evidence against Heckford and hope that she was right, and that she had not just revealed her plans to the real leader of the Protectorate. Chapter 13. The heated debate that was taking place in the kitchen was nearly as hot as the bubbling saucepans of vegetables and potatoes that were on the monstrous stoves. Kieran Valentine, Maria Lemasters, Tristan Gowran, Abigail Lemasters, Julia Boston and David Bruce were all arguing as service robots glided past them as they bickered. "How far can we trust you to keep our secrets?" interrogated Abigail Lemasters to Tristan Gowran. "How can we?" seconded Julia Boston. "Believe me, I know that I'm suspicious, but I'm here and I want to help you all," reassured Tristan, trying to defuse the argument his presence had caused. "I personally am not sure. While his spirit is appreciated, we cannot allow Tristan to alert the Order of the Realms as to where we are. That would certainly result in invasion, as they would want a staging ground for a large attack on the Nala Central Federation, which we are close to. How would that affect the people of Devonshire, who have been through enough under Traston Fell?" calmly inquired David Bruce, stroking his goatee. The group nodded and agreed with his considered words. "As I'm Sovereign Baron of the realm of Devonshire, that is important. I said to Maria that he couldn't be part of the team when we were on Stymar 5, echoed Valentine. While he was still not accustomed to being Sovereign Baron, having taken the title from the previous holder, the villainous crime lord Traston Fell, he felt a great sense of responsibility for the people of Devonshire, who had been oppressed for so many years. "You always bring up the fact that you're the Sovereign Baron. A few years ago you were employed by the previous Baron as a cold-blooded mercenary who didn't care about anyone other than themselves," exclaimed Maria, defending Tristan, whom she had started to grow close to on the trip back. "You are going to take that back right now," said Valentine aggressively. He hated being reminded about his murderous past. "I saved all of your friends when they were going to be put in jail for treason. I came to your aid. This is my castle. I ask you to accept my rules." The argument simmered down. The saucepans had come up to the boil. They glanced at each other, realising they had all said things they regretted. "I'm sorry, Valentine," said Maria, breaking the group's silence. "I should not have said that." Valentine took a deep breath, looking Tristan squarely in the eyes. "All right. So long as Tristan doesn't sell us out to his father or to anyone else, he can stay and be a part of the team," sighed Valentine, accepting that an extra trained fighter would benefit them greatly, especially one of his importance. The group, realising they were wrong, looked towards Tristan for confirmation he would not betray them. "I won't. I swear on my honour," affirmed Tristan, feeling relieved that the group had begun to accept him and not just Maria. The group in the kitchen disbanded as Valentine approached Tristan. He leaned closely to Tristan's ear and whispered, "If you betray us, I will kill you myself. These people are all I have now." "Understandable," I want it that way. I want to earn your trust, because I trust you all to do the right thing and save the realms," softly spoke Tristan, walking away, being approached by the frail Sturnon. She was now a shadow of her former self, her uniform replaced with the simple clothes that hung loose on her lifeless frame. She shuffled towards him, hunched and timid. "You must be the one everyone is talking about here," stuttered Sturnon, her constitution weak and her persona withdrawn. "Yes, I am. I assume you are High General Commissioner Sturnon. A pleasure to meet you, ma'am." "I assure you that I'm on your side," smiled Tristan, worried that Sturnon might collapse at any second. No. You are the pleasure to meet, not I. The failed leader. The one who let her best friend die," said Sturnon weakly. "Do you see him there?" she asked, pointing to the skeletal figure in the colonel's uniform that appeared before her, his black beard rotting but still familiar. "I don't see anyone there, ma'am. Are you feeling all right?" said Tristan, now deeply worried about his newfound ally. "Oh, fine," mustered Sturnon, seeing the bony spectre reach out and say in a ghostly voice, "You killed me. You failed. I would be alive if not for you." Sturnon let out a shriek of terror once more, collapsing to the floor, scurrying away from the spectre. Tristan was scared now. The person he had heard the legends of was a quivering mass, possibly hallucinating before his very eyes. "Get away from me, Robert! Get away! Forgive me! Leave me!" exclaimed Sturnon with all her might that drained from her in an instant. She collapsed to the ground, unconscious to the world. Tristan called for help as Abigail and Crusher helped her to her bed. Maria comforted the distressed Tristan, who, like all within the castle, were concerned that Sturnon may not make it much further in life. Chapter 14. Knock, knock, knock. "Enter," called Sturnon. Colonel Abigail the Master slowly opened the door, holding a small electronic device with an antenna on it, beeping constantly and quietly. "Colonel the Masters, is everything all right?" asked the High General Commissioner. Abigail signalled to her that she was tracking something on the small device, holding up a notepad that read, "Your office has been bugged." "Yes, everything is fine. I wanted to talk to you about the excess reports," said Abigail, her voice slower as she softly followed the tracker's signal to the bug in the office. "Good to hear, Colonel," replied Sturnon. Abigail was moving to a large leafed potted plant in the corner behind the door opposite the desk. She then reached into the pot of the plant and felt around for a few seconds, taking out a miniature listening device, showing Katelyn before crushing it in her hand. It gave a limp sizzle as Abigail threw it in the bin. They both breathed a great sigh of relief. Abigail ensured the door was closed and sat down to talk to Sturnon. "Thank you, Abigail. How did you know?" asked Sturnon, relieved. "Its signal temporarily got crossed with my personal communicator yesterday. I started hearing your conversation with Colonel Ember about effective policy planning and the autopsy results of Colonel Helga Dramden," explained Abigail the Masters, knowing that what she accidentally heard would have most certainly been heard by whoever had bugged Katelyn Sturnon, along with many other confidential meetings. "I see. Please call a meeting of the Council of the Colonels. I think it has come time to find out who's been bugging me," ordered Katelyn Sturnon, ready to see who knew about the bug. "Do you think that Heckford is about to play his hand, ma'am?" asked Abigail cautiously, thinking that everything was about to kick off. Sturnon turned around in her chair, staring out the full-height windows that glared down to the street below. At the top of the constabulary tower, it was lonely. "Yes, Colonel, I think he is, or one of his allies," said Sturnon carefully. "What happens in the meeting will determine the course of events in the city for years to come." The Council of the Colonels sat in their seats. It was highly irregular for the High General Commissioner to call a meeting this quickly. There was an uncomfortable aura that engulfed the room, the Colonels shuffling their capes in their seats. The High General Commissioner marched into the boardroom, the glass panelling rattling as she closed the door, followed by Colonel Abigail the Masters, taking the seat on the left. Katelyn remained standing to address the Council. "Thank you all for coming. I would like to inform you all the progress of the investigation into the death of Colonel Helga Dramden that is being conducted by Department 4, clearly spoke the High General Commissioner. The Colonels looked at each other, all looking unsettled by this. "I would like to vote on the discontinuation of this investigation," abruptly stated Sturnon. There was a panicked glance at each other. Colonels Keller, Jameson, Ravensthorpe and Arensk looked towards Heckford. Colonel Heckford gave a small, unnoticeable gesture, brushing his hair behind his right ear. That was the confirmation that Sturnon needed. The vote took place. Robert Ember, David Bruce and Abigail the Masters all voted no, with Sturnon abstaining. The rest voted yes. Once the vote ended, the meeting was adjourned. Katelyn Sturnon, Robert Ember, Abigail Masters and David Bruce met in her office. "So, ma'am, I assume that I will not order Major Smith to discontinue the investigation?" checked Ember. He knew that Sturnon was up to something in the meeting. "Of course, the investigation is continuing. I think that if we are all agreed, we now know for certain who is in play and who the leader is. It is my conviction that we put everyone on high alert, and I talked to Colonel Heckford to try and defuse the situation," said Sturnon, every word having weight to it. "I can agree to that," confirmed Colonel Bruce. "As can I," agreed Colonel Masters. "What you think is best, ma'am," assured Colonel Ember, his long-time commander and friend smiling graciously at him. While he had not trusted Sturnon when she first came to Department 4, he had come to trust her both implicitly and explicitly. High General Commissioner Sturnon stood to prepare herself for perhaps the most important conversation of her life, potentially the most important in the history of the Constabulary and Nala Central itself. Chapter 15. Drowning in a pool of darkness, Sturnon lay in her bed, as the rest gathered around her. Their prayers for her health swirled around the bedroom like a whirlpool. She vaguely knew of their presence, but did not have the strength to respond. In her dreams she was in a black void. The darkness sucked her in and began to fill her lungs with water, or the blood of her dead allies. So much suffering that had happened. First the death of Helga Dramden, then the deaths of Kyle Bruce, Blast, and even her dear friend Robert Ember. They had all trusted her, and yet she had failed them so utterly. As the hours and days rolled on, she was hooked up to an IV drip, still out cold. In her mind she saw her room, sparse and bare, with a chair in the corner. She sat up in her bed, leaning slightly closer to the chair, where the skeletal figure returned, forcing her back under the duvet covers. "You cower before me, the great High General Commissioner? So pathetic," sneered the spectre. His form came into grave focus as he rose from the leather armchair, putting a deathly claw on his prey's bedpost. Not long until you join me. You cannot run from it. You cannot hide from it. My vengeance will be sweet. After all, you denied me countless promotions, made me play second fiddle to you everywhere you went. I wish I had never met you." The skeleton teased as Sturnon retreated further within herself, trying to close her eyes, but as it was a nightmare she could not. "If it were not for you, I would be alive. Your dear friend would still be here to tell you that everything is fine, even though it is an abominable catastrophe," continued the figure. His words echoed around the chamber, getting closer and closer to Sturnon's head, as if to rip out the soul and drag it to the realm of the dead, forever imprisoning it. Sturnon knew her time was up, but then she heard a silent whisper of words from beyond. "I know you cannot hear me, ma'am. I'm not even sure if it will do any good, but here we are," said Captain Augustus Montgomery, slightly tearing up, his rich voice providing a lifeline to Sturnon. "When you first joined Department 4, we were all sceptical about you. You were a strict outsider who had taken a job that had previously been promised to Robert Ember, one of our own. As time went on, however, you earned our trust and our friendship. I, like so many, owe you so much. I know you blame yourself for this mess, but you are not the one who caused this. Out of anyone, you were the closest to ending it before it even began. We all knew what we were risking, and we all accepted it. Those who sadly died during the course of events in the escape would not want you to become a shell of the great person and friend you once were. They would want you to stand up to this newly formed Nala Central Federation and lead us back to the way things were. You are the leader we need. Get better soon, please, in the name of everything that is good in the realms." He stroked his brown moustache and left Sturnon's bedside, who remained immobile in her bed. These words filtered into Sturnon's mind as she slowly started to rise, sitting up to confront the skeletal figure. "I know who you pretend to be. A great man and friend I had. Robert Ember. He was the best of anyone, and I trusted him," announced Sturnon, getting out of her bed and standing strong for the first time in months as she stood against the skeletal figure at her bedside. "You cannot fight me. You cannot stop me. You shall die like your friend did, knowing your failure has doomed everyone." The skeleton, trying to intimidate Sturnon, said, but she held strong and returned. "No. While my failure has set us back, we will rebuild, and I will be the one to lead them to victory, my training and insights aiding them in their fight against the injustice that has befallen Nala Central." "No, no, no, you will fail!" screamed the spectral figure as it disintegrated into ashes, which blew out of the open latticed window, across the bay and into the open sea. She was free. Sturnon woke up, promptly getting out of bed, drinking the Vita smoothie on her dresser. She got herself sorted. First, personal hygiene and grooming, her smooth brown hair once again short and combed over, her makeup applied with care and precision. Next, she changed, putting on her High General Commissioner's uniform, the badge shining in the dull light from the lamp, then attaching her cape, flowing behind her, before finally attaching her blue epaulets, the final sign of her rank and status. Pulling on her black faux leather boots, Katelyn marched out of the door, down the stone stairs, through the grand hallways until reaching the double doors of the living room. Opening both, the room came to a sudden stop as they saw her standing tall in the doorway. A new aura of confidence had come over her. Smiling, Maria stood up to salute and greet the returning High General Commissioner. "Ma'am, good to see you back on your feet." "It is good to be back, and please call me Katelyn or Sturnon. I am no longer High General Commissioner, but I will be once again," announced Sturnon, knowing that she would be a key leader in the victory of the Freedom Team over the Nile Central Federation. "Once again? Are you sure about that, Sturnon?" said Valentine, with a slightly confused look on his face. The turnaround was remarkable. "Yes, Valentine, I intend for us to be victorious and return Nile Central to what it was. You all have my word," confirmed Sturnon. The room knew she was back to her old self, a self-assured commander who could achieve any goal that she set herself to. They were ready to win not just individual battles, they were ready to win the war. Sturnon smiled as the group embraced her and welcomed her back. She knew that while she had lost so much in the last year, she still had good friends who had become her family. Chapter 16. Sturnon was in Colonel Heckford's office. He was out for lunch, and Sturnon seized the opportunity to go through his computer for any additional evidence as she looked through his emails. Checking the encrypted file, she saw there was one email with the subject line, Protectorate Directive. It read as follows: "To all commanders within the Protectorate. As you are aware, High General Commissioner Sturnon is closing in on our group. This means that the schedule for triggering of Directive 158609 has moved up. Please ensure that all Protectorate officers are put on standby for this, as I suspect that the directive will be given in the coming week. Many thanks for your cooperation, Colonel Sebastian Heckford." A signed confession if Katelyn had ever seen one herself. She downloaded all his files and emails onto a small pocket data drive that she slipped into her pocket. The lift sounded off at the other end of the hallway. Heckford was back from lunch and about to be confronted. The Colonel casually walked into his office, then stopped dead when he saw the High General Commissioner sitting behind his glass desk, staring at him. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" inquired Heckford, with a half-smile on his face. Sturnon stood up and turned around the computer monitor with the email on it. Heckford's face dropped into a serious expression. He knew his cover had been blown. "Colonel Heckford, what is this?" asked Sturnon. "It is an email," replied Heckford. "Yes, please read what it says, Colonel," ordered the High General Commissioner. Heckford read it, looking at Sturnon with narrowed eyes. "What purpose does this Protectorate have, and what is this directive that the email mentions?" demanded Sturnon. "The Protectorate is 88% of all officers within the constabulary, and the directive is the order that I will give to remove those who are not part of it," said Heckford calmly. "What is your goal? Why would you do this? Damien Paulstrom trusted you," said Sturnon in an authoritative tone. "The Protectorate is the group that will take control of the constabulary and integrate with the villain empire once they arrive at Government House to seize power. As to why we are doing this, is because I realised after the Bagstapian Revolution that the villain empire and Nile Central Constabulary are two similar forces with similar goals and objectives, and I knew that if we integrated, we would eliminate the threat to each other and strengthen our realm's might. Most of the constabulary agreed with me when I approached them, and then when Talia Verst approached me with forming a Nile Central Federation that would rule the rest of the realms, and with there being a considerable number of members within the Protectorate already, how could I say no?" revealed Heckford, confident in his rationale. "So you confess you have been behind this all this time?" asked Sturnon. "Yes, I do. Though I wonder, what gave me away?" inquired the Colonel. "The murder of Helga Dramden. The only person that would be threatened by our investigations that were going on would be you. As well as that, the tip-off that she was given was routed back to your office," explained Sturnon. "Ah, I see. That is what gave me away," smiled Heckford. He took out his communication device and said with a slightly maniacal laugh, "Attention all members of the Protectorate. Directive 158609 is now in effect. Arrest all non-Protectorate officers immediately." There was a rush as 2 armed guards came into the office, flanking Colonel Heckford, aiming their guns, set to kill, at High General Commissioner Sturnon. "And that triggers the takeover of Nala Central," said Heckford smugly, as Villain Empire transports began hurtling past the windows, landing outside the nearby government house, led by Emperor Talia Verst. There was a loud bang and shots were fired from the offices of Colonels Ember, Bruce and the Masters as all 3 barged their way through the corridor past the onslaught of soldiers stationed on the level. "I have a contingency of my own, Colonel. One that I triggered before arriving, meaning that it's time for me to leave," gently said Katelyn Sturnon, before quickly drawing her gun, stunning the 2 armed officers before shooting Heckford in the shoulder. She ran out the door, meeting up with the colonels who were making their way through the offices to the High General Commissioner's office, where there was an escape route to the roof, where she had her agent-class jet ready to go. Sebastian Heckford got to his feet as Sturnon reached the lift in her office and ascended to the roof. He picked up his communicator. "Commander Merrick, follow Sturnon's jet and stop her and any of her allies," he spat, still smarting from the blast wound he had sustained. High General Commissioner Katelyn Sturnon, Colonel Robert Ember, Colonel David Bruce and Colonel Abigail the Masters ran along the platforms on the roof of the constabulary tower towards her jet, its wings up, though rear ramp down, ready to go. They boarded and closed the ramp. "Who is going to fly this thing?" asked Sturnon. She wasn't completely sure how to fly the jet, but could probably get it up in the air. "Probably." "I can fly it," responded Colonel Bruce, having been an ace pilot himself before an injury restrained him. "I will need a co-pilot, though." Colonel LeMasters took her seat at the co-pilot's array, activating the wingtip engines, which burst into life. Colonel Ember and High General Commissioner Sturnon went into the back and sat near the cockpit door on the High General Commissioner's in-flight seats. Robert Ember held out his hand as they took off to comfort Sturnon. Everything they knew was now in pieces, and she held his hand and smiled at him. The lift engines then began to raise the jet as the wings folded down as they left the platform, heading to Nala Central Grand Park. There was a problem, however. They heard the screech of troop transport ships launching from the tower's main hangar. They realised that Heckford had sent a pursuit party. The jet soared as the 5 troop transports followed, their repulsor engines wailing as they attempted to keep up with the jet, but they did and started firing small shots at the jet. "Hold on, everyone, I'm going to have to lose them," shouted Bruce, who had returned to his fighter pilot training. He banked right, ducking and weaving his way through the skyscrapers and above buildings. It seemed as if they were lost them. They then landed at Nala Central Grand Park, where a large rusty ship with a hangar room waited for them. They landed within its frame and disembarked. They were greeted by Maria the Masters, who was there with everyone else except for the new heroes who had apparently been rounded up and arrested. "Thank goodness you made it here," she exclaimed. "Captain the Masters, whose ship is this?" Sturnon asked. "That would be my cruise," came the approaching voice of Kieran Valentine. "While I would like to discuss this further with you, High General Commissioner, and the morality about it, I suggest we defend our flanks as we can't take off as there are cyclone jets and troop transports incoming." The transports that had been following them landed at the front of the park, with black-clad troops disembarking. They were led by Commander Merrick, who now worked as the enforcer for Colonel Heckford, having previously been the commander of High General Commissioner Bagstaff's guard. The blast fire began with a nightmarish flurry, with those assembled defending themselves. Shots fired across the open port side of the Voyage Maker, scorching everything inside lightly. As the soldiers closed in on Matilda, in her brown overalls, tried to fire up the engine, then BANG! "Son of a brick! The Peronium injector has just gone offline," cursed Matilda. Ricky, Spanner and Ashley Turner all heard this and went to the engine room to fix it. They weren't going anywhere without that injector online. The armoured soldiers marched on. Merrick reached the boarding ramp, aiming his gun at squadron leader Carl Bruce, who was busy firing at a group of soldiers entrenched. He squeezed the trigger and with one shot killed Carl Bruce. He fell to the floor, his light blue jumpsuit deflating. His blonde hair flopped as his head hit the floor, and he dropped the blaster he had been defending himself with. Colonel David Bruce saw what Merrick done. He let out a roar, drew his pistol and forced the commander to retreat. Bruce then knelt by his son's lifeless corpse and let out a tear of grief. Getting up, David dragged the body further into the ship, off the boarding ramp, tears streaming down his cheeks. Ammo and Blast were defending the engines from attack, their heavy weapons firing on all cylinders, taking out numerous soldiers that advanced, but they were unrelenting. Ammo took a shot to the ribs, dropping him to the floor of the boarding ramp temporarily. The soldiers then poured onto Blast, her twin cannons firing continually. Soldiers fired, kept firing, until they hit her chest once. This then gave the Horde the chance to unleash a hellfire on her, with her body falling to the ramp floor mutilated by blaster burns. Ammo slowly regained his footing. Picking up his machine gun, he then began a rampage at the soldiers, taking out the wall of armour that surrounded Blast's body. "You Duplo bricks!" yelled Ammo, his voice full of anger as he launched at them, cracking their helmets with his gun's axe, knocking them unconscious. He let off a furious flurry of fire as he picked up Blast, and the firemen carried her off the ramp and into the ship. "Try that now! If it don't start now, we're never getting out of here!" bellowed Ricky, having installed a new polonium injector with Spanner and Ashley Turner. The three engineers hoped that it didn't explode. Hopefully they had attached enough duct tape. Matilda fired up the engines, which moaned into life. The port ramp raised, and the Voyage Maker shakily rose as it continued to take blast fire. The ship tanked around as it gained altitude. Once it reached cruising altitude, its realm driver was activated and it disappeared to parts unknown. Once they were on the realm road, Sturnon took stock of everyone within the hangar of the Voyage Maker. She saw David Bruce and his wife Chloe mourning over the body of their son near the fore, and towards the aft and the engines, Abigail Lemasters, Maria Lemasters, Lieutenant Curtis Michael Bolt, Major Jonathan Stephen Smith, and Principal Instructor Andrew Ammo Wicks gathered around their teammate's body, all feeling tremendous grief inside. Captain Augustus Montgomery approached the High General Commissioner and spoke very gravely. "Ma'am, there is something I think you should see. Brace yourself, though." Sturnon followed and then saw it. Colonel Robert Ember's cold, dead body, with a single surgical shot to the heart, the energy burn of the shot still very visible. Katelyn's hand clamped itself over her mouth to prevent herself from screaming and crying for the loss of her dear friend and colleague, a man who she would have happily sacrificed herself for. She calmed herself and excused herself, walking past the many wounded and the 3 dead bodies that were scattered within the cavernous cargo hangar of the Voyage Maker. Sturnon forced herself to march to the cockpit and ask Matilda, the pilot, if there was somewhere private she could go. She was directed to Matilda's dingy bedroom near the cockpit. She closed the metal door, sat on the used bed, and for the first time in her many years of service, cried a flood of silent tears. There was nothing she could do.